Thank you for coming out. Hope everybody's keeping warm on a cold winter day. I'd like to, with your permission, continue from last week, but first I'd like to ask you, if you don't mind, to turn off your phones, work out how they turn off, how they turn down, how they mute. That would be very helpful. Thank you so much. We do have a lot to do. I hope you've got the source sheet in front of you. First of all, I'd like to recap on very briefly what we did last week, because today runs on from that. We are dealing with a very painful topic, which remains a very painful topic. And as I said last week, the Torah that we learn on it not only informs our thoughts and values, even though Baruch Hashem we don't have to make the decisions, but it gives us guidance on how to analyze these ideas in our minds. And it also, Be'ezrat Hashem, is a schut for the hostages that remain to be released, that they should be released very soon, B'brias HaNefesh, B'brias HaGuf, Be'ezrat Hashem, and our learning should be a merit for them. The learning that we did last week basically goes like this. Let's do it point by point. Point number one is that there is an overriding obligation to redeem hostages. It is a great mitzvah. The Rambam lists 7 or 8 different mitzvot that you do by redeeming hostages. And the Shulchan Aruch says every minute that we don't redeem a hostage when we could and should redeem the hostage, which of course are the key words, every moment we delay is tantamount to murdering that person. So we need to move as fast as we can to redeem any hostage that we can and should redeem. However, point 2, the Mishnah says that we may not overpay for hostages because of tikkun ha'olam. There comes a point where we may not pay anymore. Why is that? The Gemara gave 2 reasons. Either because it puts too much financial pressure on the community, or the second reason, which is the one which is followed by the Rambam and the Shulchan Aruch, because it could well encourage the hostage takers to take future hostages, and there's a long-term downside in that. That is the reason that we tend to follow, and that is the reason that is brought down, as I said, in the Shulchan Aruch. However, point number 3, we then had a Gemara where Rabbi Yeshua redeemed who was to be Rabbi Ishmael, a young Talmid Chacham in captivity in Rome. He redeemed him for an enormous amount of money. And the question is, how does that fit with the Mishnah that says that's not allowed? And Tosfos gives 3 answers, we looked at last week. One answer is that there's an exception for a Talmid Chacham, which is interesting, although we looked a little bit at that itself has significant exceptions. Remember the story of the Maharam of Rothenburg, where he forbade them from ransoming him, and also more recently, Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky's psak, when Rav Hutner was taken hostage, that we may not redeem Rav Hutner for a large amount of money. So that itself has restrictions. The second reason why it might be different in that case in the Gemara in Gittin is because it was B'shat Churban. It was a time of Churban. So the considerations of Tikkun HaOlam didn't apply in the same way. What's the Churban? We gave a few answers. One suggestion of Rav Osher Weiss was that at a time when morale needs to be lifted, so we can pay extra because people need to see that we're getting the hostages back. Very relevant to our times. Standard reason is, B'shas Churban is, well, what harm can it do? It's as bad as it can be anyway. We're worried about making it worse. It couldn't get any worse. That's maybe an exception. And the third most... Hello? Here we are. The third most important exception for our purposes is that maybe if the hostage's life is in danger, in immediate danger, we must overpay for the hostage. And that was a very controversial reason. Because some people said, yes, that is a real exception because there are hostages and there are hostages. Back in the old day, many hostages were taken and kept very healthy because they needed to remain healthy because they were exacting a very handsome reward for those hostages. So it was in their interest to keep them healthy. However, there are some hostages where the hostage takers really don't care, and they will murder them in a second, and maybe those hostages we have to redeem even for a higher price. And that was a very debated issue. There was back and forth, and different Meforshim said yes, said no, and there was a difference of opinion, and that remains a difference of opinion. However, we finished off last week and we said that even though there are restrictions in halakha at redeeming hostages, the Jewish people can't hold themselves back. And the minhag of the Jewish people, we saw the Radvaz, we saw the Yam Shel Shlomo, is even though they shouldn't overpay, they do overpay because they can't bear not getting Jewish hostages back. And we see this in our day. That's where we left it off last week. Today, I need to move it forward to the next shlav. which is the whole conversation that we've had so far has really been about redeeming hostages for money. That is not the situation that we find ourselves in today. The hostage takers are not interested in money. What they want is for us to release criminals and terrorists who are very likely to go on to kill people in the future. So what really we're weighing today is not the hostages versus the financial burden, but the lives of the hostages in captivity today versus the lives of the people who, God forbid, could be killed in the future by the very people that we release today. That's what we're weighing. We're weighing lives against lives. Let me just go on a little bit before we take some questions. And that may be a completely different cheshbon. And there are many angles to that. And that's what I'd really like to analyze today. Because that's where we're at. It could be that the whole discussion last week was fairly irrelevant, because it was always talking about money. And that's not the reality today. So how does this work? How does this work in a time of war? How does this work with the Israeli state? You had a question, Mami?
Yeah, and always a new prophet.
Correct.
In other words, we're not cutting that.
That's actually a very good point. Meaning the lady's saying that even though the people who were released went on to do heinous things, if they hadn't been released, who's to say there wouldn't have been other people who would have risen to that position? Meaning, can you turn around and make a causal link and say, had we not released the terrorists in 2011 or 12, whenever it was, then this would never have happened? Or do we turn around and say, it would have happened anyway, they would have planned something, if not him, then him, or him, someone would have planned it. That's a very good point, and it brings in the level of uncertainty in what we're dealing with. And that's what I want to start with. At the bottom of page 1, before we get into the sources, let me just maybe lay down a little bit of the philosophical background to the question that we're debating. And I heard an excellent share from Rabbi Daniel Feldman that I've given you a link to at the bottom. When we're dealing with war, then we often have different rules of property, different rules of the sanctity of life. Of course, life is always sacred, but when a war is in progress, there are different things that are permitted. The government is allowed to requisition property from the host nation in order to fight the war. It's allowed to take property from the enemy, to kill the enemy. How does it deal with enemy civilians? That is a topic that I'd like to get onto, which I'm not going to get onto today. Maybe next week, or maybe in a couple of weeks. It's a very big topic. But there are fundamentally two ethical approaches to how we deal with the rules of war. One of them is called consequentialism. Consequentialism means that basically the ends justify the means. I need to get something done. I have a goal of war. Anything basically is permitted in order for me to achieve that goal. That's one approach, what's called consequentialism. I just need to get it done, and the means will be permitted whatever they are. Another approach is formalism. Formalism is no, there are rules, there are moral and ethical principles that we may not break. Meaning, I don't know the consequences. It's hard to know the consequences. Maybe a religious formalist would say, it's not my job to think about the consequences. God runs the world. It's not my responsibility. I just need to do the right thing. Or maybe a non-religious or a practical formalist would say, you never know the consequences. There are unintended consequences. How can I say that the ends justify the means when things may happen that I never expected? So I just have to do the right thing. That's formalism. Now, there are extreme versions of this, which maybe you'll say both of the extremes are wrong. Maybe an extreme consequentialism will say, you can torture people, do anything you like to them just to get the information that you need in order to fight the war. Now, there have to be some limits on that, or do they? That's one extreme. And extreme formalism will say, I must never tell a lie, even if somebody is about to be murdered. There's a famous case of Kant. Even if somebody's hiding in your house and the murderers come knocking on the door, is there someone hiding in the house that you want to kill? You have to say, yes, there is, because I may not tell a lie, even to sell a life. That is to save a life. That's an extreme version of this. And there are lots of things in the middle. You might say, yes, I'm a consequentialist. I need to get it done. But there's a long-term tikkun olam factor, meaning, yes, I want to release these hostages, but I don't want to release prisoners who may cause future hostages. So you can see it's complicated. And even if you're talking about strict ethical values, formalism, well, which values? I have an imperative to save a life, but I also have an imperative not to negotiate with terrorists. So you'll see these things are really not simple at all. A consequentialist might turn around and say, we have to get the hostages out. That's all we need. That's all that matters. These people need to be released. Pikuach nefesh right now. A long-term consequentialist might turn around and say, I'd love to get them released. We want to get them released, but we can't release thousands of prisoners who are going to kill future people. A formalist might turn around and say, I'd love to get them released, but we do not negotiate with terrorists. Because by negotiating with them, we recognize them, and in some way, we validate or partner in some way with their evil, by even talking to them. And if the hostages, could you turn it up a little bit more? Because I just... It's good now? Yeah. Okay, fine. If the hostages are not released, that's a tragedy, but I'm not negotiating with Hamas. You see, there are different approaches to this. We have to try and navigate our way through some of the sources. So let's have a look at that now. With that relatively short introduction, there's obviously much more. Let us have a look at some of the sources. Page 2. So I'm going to deal with the first sources quite quickly, because really what I want to do with you today is talk you through... Okay, can we was it better before? Yes. Okay, can we try and go back to Chadesh Yameinu Kikedem? No, that's better? That's better? It's better now? Okay. I mean, if there's an echo, I could always sing for you. I mean, I have a nice acoustic. Okay. Source number 1. I'm going to deal with these quite quickly, because what I'd really like to do today is take you through Rav Ovadia Yosef's tshuva on the raid on Entebbe. As you well know, in 1976, in July 1976, the hostages were taken in a plane that was diverted to Uganda, to Entebbe, and a number of key poskim were asked to rule on whether it was permitted to release terrorists in order to get these hostages back. And that was the first time that the Israeli government had really seriously considered this. And Rav Ovadia has a 17,000-word tshuva. I didn't count every word, I just did it per page. So it takes a lot of reading, but I've been through it, and we're going to try and summarize that in the next 45 minutes. But I think we'll do it hopefully pretty well. There's Rat Hashem. The first important point is that you may not take one life to save another life. That is fundamental in Judaism. It's brought down in number 1. The case is brought down of a woman whose baby is causing her enormous difficulties in childbirth. A woman who is having great difficulties giving birth. We are allowed, even mandated, to kill the fetus in her uterus, even if there is no way to save the uterus. Her life becomes before the uterus's life, the fetus's life. Yatsa Ruban, but if the baby has emerged, I'm not getting into all the definitions of what that is. Ein Nogiba, we cannot kill the baby, even though we need to save the mother. She'ein dochin nefesh mipnei nefesh. We may not take a life to save a life. And once the baby is alive, which we definitely define as born, we're not getting into that now, we talked about it in our shirim on abortion, we may not kill one person to save another. That's fundamental. We know we may not even save ourselves by killing another person. Number 2, a very famous source, I'm not going to read it inside, but we know the big 3 that you may not break even if one's own life is in danger, and one of those is murder. I may not murder another person to save my own life. Why? What is the underlying rationale? And this is very important for us. Look at number 3, how do we know we may not murder to save life? Svarahu, it makes sense, it's logical. Someone asked Rava, Amalein said to him, Maridura, if this bandit, if this evil sultan, Amali zil katle leploini, go and kill this man, ve'iloin, if you don't, katlidalach, I'm going to kill you. Murder in order to save your life. Amalei, you have to say to him, likatluch, I will be killed, v'loi tiktol, and I will not kill others. My chazid, the damadidei sumakfei. Why do you feel that his blood is redder than your blood? Very famous. Maybe his blood, maybe your blood is redder than his, maybe his blood is redder than yours. You can't tell. Life is infinite. And therefore you cannot ever take a life to save a life. However, ever is perhaps a too strong word, because there are occasionally people whose blood is less red than the other person's blood. A roidef, for example, someone who is actively trying to kill others, has gone down a notch, and their blood is less red, quotes and quotes, and therefore you may, even must kill them. And we'll see there may be other people as well who fall into that category. So that's the basic starting point. You may not take a life to save a life. What about taking a life to save multiple lives? The answer is no, generally not. Number 4, if non-Jews capture women and say to them, "Tnu achad mechem, give us one of the women, v'nitma, and we'll rape that woman, God forbid. Ve'im lav, and if not, hari ani matmeimet kulcham, we're going to rape all of you. Hand somebody over to be raped, or you will all be raped. Yitnu et kulam, they must all allow themselves, God forbid, to be raped. V'al yimser lehem nefesh achat miYisrael, you may not hand over a Jew." That's key. You may not hand over someone, even to save more people. And this is translated by the Tosefta into a case of murder. And this is where we're going. Again, I'm doing this quite fast, because this is going to lead us into the main event. Look at number 5. A group of people, Sha'amru lahem goyim, and the non-Jews, hold them up, and they say to them, "Tnu lana echad mechem v'nargeu, give us one person and we will murder him. Ve'im lav, and if not, hari anu orgim et kulcham, we'll murder all of you. Hand over someone to be killed." Says the Tosefta, following this idea of the Mishnah, Yargu kolam v'al yisveru lahem nefesh achat miYisrael. They must all be killed and never hand over a person. Aval, however, and here's the key for us, im yichduhu lahem, if they specify someone, kagon sheyachdu l'Sheva ben Bichri, just like the story of Sheva ben Bichri, where Sheva ben Bichri was on the run from David HaMelech and holed up in a city, and Yoav came to besiege the city, and the Isha Chachama, the wise woman, came out and says, "Why are you destroying a Jewish city?" And he said, "Well, we have nothing against you, we just need Sheva ben Bichri." She said, "Okay, fine." And she chopped off his head and they threw it out. And that was the end of that, and he went home. You may kill someone, you may hand them over to be killed. There, they killed him. Here's just hand him over if he's been specified. Then you can give him over, and they don't all have to be killed. 2 caveats. Amar Rabbi Yehuda said, no, but my dvar mamurim bizman shehem bifnim b'v'hem b'chutz. If they're all not likely to be killed, if he is with them and they're all going to be killed. But if they're not all going to be killed, if they are all going to be killed, if they're all going to be killed anyway, meaning, if he's going to die anyway, says Rabbi Yehuda, then that's when you can hand him over to be killed. But if there's a chance that he might survive, then you can't hand him over. It's only if he'll definitely be killed either way. If he won't be killed, then you can't hand him over. And they bring from the case of the city. And the key thing, that's less important for us, but the end point is very important. Reb Shimon says no. Kach amar lehem. This is what the wise woman said to them. Kol hamoyred b'malchus beis David chayev misa. The point with Sheva ben Bichri is not that he was identified, is that he was guilty. He was a rebel. That's why you could hand him over. There were 2 strikes against him. Number 1, they identified him, and number 2, he was guilty and he deserved it. That's Reb Shimon ben Lakish's approach. So which way do we paskin? Do you have to be guilty, or do you not have to be guilty? And this is extremely important for us. Because if we here are arguing in our particular case, do we risk the lives of future people to save the lives of present people? None of those people are guilty. They're all innocent. So maybe we just can't hand anyone over to save anyone in any way. We'll have to determine what handing over means, but if you have to be guilty, that's not going to help us. In number 6, I brought you a Talmud Yerushalmi, where it debates, there's Rabbi Yochanan's view, is you don't have to be guilty, Reish Lakish's view, you do have to be guilty, and the Shulchan Aruch paskins what? Have a look in number 7. Tnu lanu echad mechem v'nargeu. If the group say, give over one of you for us to kill, lo yitnu lahem echad mechem. They cannot give over one of the people. Unless they specify that person. And there is a view, even if they specify him, you may not hand him over. So the Ramah brings down 2 opinions. You may hand them over to save everybody if they've been identified. And other people say, no, you may not. You may only hand them over if they're actually guilty. So how does any of this help us at all? So I brought you at the bottom of the page a little bit of an analysis. Are we handing over people to save people? So let's say we make a deal with Hamas. So future lives are quote unquote being handed over to save the hostages. Are we allowed to hand over future people who are innocent in order to save the present people? So you may turn around and say, well, we're not handing anyone over. It's different when you pick up someone and push him out and say, kill him and save us all, than when you're dealing with the probability that future people may be killed. Maybe the prohibition there is the cruelty of taking one person and pushing them out. Maybe it's not relevant to us at all. So that's one angle. Let's say we don't do a deal, and we say we're not handing over future people to save future lives, but are we therefore handing over the hostages in order to save the lives of future people? To which you could argue, no, we're not handing over anybody. They were taken against their will. We are not committing any acts of cruelty. What is the bottom line here? It's not clear whether this applies to our case at all, because there's nobody who's guilty, and nobody's handing over anybody. Now, I brought you the analysis, even though I ended up by saying, well, it probably doesn't apply, because Rabbi says we have to work through that first. Because if there's a clear answer on we may not hand over one life to save another, then that's going to inform our decision, maybe. But there isn't a clear answer, because no one's handing anyone over, and nobody's guilty. That's one thing. Okay? That's number one. Number two, even if, let's say, we risk the lives of future people by saving the hostages, is that an act of cruelty, or is that an act of hatzalah? We're really saving people. We're not killing people, God forbid. Have a look at number 8. We've looked at this before. This is the Chazon Ish's presentation of the trolley problem. The classic, the trolley dilemma, where you have a train which is heading down a track, and he's about to kill 20 people, and you're standing at the points, and you can switch the track, and you can swerve it over, and it'll kill 3 people. Do you swerve it over, and therefore directly cause, or indirectly cause their deaths? Or do you say, you know something, I'm not interfering, it is what it is, and what's meant to happen will happen? Look at the Chazon Ish. So he says as follows. We have to look, he's not talking about hostages, he is talking generally about the situation. But let's say someone sees a missile, which is heading over to kill many people. You can direct it away. To a different side. And it will kill only one person and save all the others. There's there are other people who are on your side will be saved, and the other people will be killed. But if you don't do it, they'll all be killed. And the one person on the side will live. Meaning, do you intervene to save the many? So he says, this case is not like handing someone over to be killed to save others. Because in that case of handing over, the actual handing over is the cruel thing that you're not allowed to do. Shel harigat nefesh, you are conspiring in the murder of a Jew. You cannot do that to save other people. Okay? Because the nature of the act is cruel. But here, it's actually you're saving people. So he says, basically, in the case where you're handing somebody over, you're directly giving someone over to be killed in order to save others. But redirecting the missile, you are actually saving people. Your action is one of hatzalah. Your action is not one of harigah. And you are not in any way responsible for the death of this other one person who now is going to die because you've redirected the missile. He just happens to be on the wrong side. On the other side, the other people are going to be saved. And we'll see Rabbi Vadia talks about the idea of, let's say someone, God forbid, throws a hand grenade into a room of people, and somebody has the presence of mind to pick it up quickly and throw it out of the window. But I don't know who's outside. Is that allowed? He says, yes, it's allowed. Because the Maisa itself is a Maisa Hatzalah. You're actually doing an act of saving, even though indirectly people will be killed, but that's not your responsibility. Because you're really saving someone. On this basis, you might argue that the hostages should be released. we should release the terrorists, because that's not an act of handing over and cruelly hurting future people. We're really only focused on saving the hostages right now. And whatever happens will happen. And that's an interesting application. By the way, the Chazon Ish was asked a real shaila. There was a taxi driver who was driving down a hill, and his brakes failed. And what he did is he was heading towards a group of people, and he diverted the taxi and killed somebody else in order to not head into the group of people. And then afterwards he said, I can't live with myself. Did I do the right thing or did I do the wrong thing? Because the brakes failing was nothing to do with me. But turning the steering wheel, I killed this person. And the Chazon Ish gives this answer. And at the end he says, well, maybe you could see it the other way as well. I'm not getting into that now. But Rabbi Vadia picks up this Chazon Ish, as we'll see in a few moments. So where have we got so far? You may not hand over one person to save another, or even to save many. But if it's an act of Hatzalah, if you're really saving people, the fact that other future people will die, and we'll see in a minute, it's not certain, but even if it is certain, that's called an act of Hatzalah. That's not called an act of cruelty, and that, says the Chazon Ish, would be permitted. By the way, just before we get into Rabbi Vadia, a person is definitely permitted to give up their own life in order to save many people. That is an act of enormous piety, and we learn that from the story of Lulinus and Pappus. If you look in number 9 for a second, this is just in parentheses, Trajan, not Turnus Rufus, when Trajan wanted Larog at Lulinus and Pappus, he wanted to kill them, Achiv, two brothers, Beludkia. Amalehem imo shel Chananya Mishael v'Azariah atem yavo Eloheichem v'yatzel etchem miyadi kederech shehitzil et Chananya Mishael v'Azariah miyad Nebuchadnezzar. If you're really from the Jewish people, let God do a miracle for you and He'll save you. And they answer him, it's quite famous, they answer him, there won't be any miracles here because we are not as deserving as the three boys in the furnace, and you are not as deserving as a king of Nebuchadnezzar, like Nebuchadnezzar was, in order to have a miracle done next to him, and therefore there ain't going to be no miracles here. And even if you didn't kill us, they say, we could always die somewhere else. There are many ways that we could die. This is very interesting Gemara as to whether if a person is about to be killed, then that's going to happen either way. The person is going to kill them, and even if they don't kill them, they're going to die, God forbid, in some other way. It's an interesting way of analyzing it. But Rashi explains how did these two brothers die? That there was one of the Roman officials' daughter was killed, and there was a blood libel that they blamed the Jews of the town, and they were going to kill all the Jews because this Roman official's daughter was killed. And Pappus and Lunilis stepped forward and said, we did it, we killed her. And they hadn't killed her, but they did it in order to save the lives of the Jewish people, and they died al Kiddush Hashem. And if you look in Rashi for a second, he says, Haya Lud, this Maisa was in Lud, this is why we say, Haruge Lud, those two boys who were killed in Lud, there is no one that can reach their level in Gan Eden because they voluntarily gave up their lives in order to save the Jewish people. That is not only permitted, but an act of enormous piety. Rav Chaim Shmulevitz said that the soldiers fighting in the IDF are comparable to the Haruge Lud. They put their own lives forward and they say, we are prepared, if need be, to be killed in order to save the lives of Am Yisrael, and therefore there is no place, said Rabbi Chaim Shmulevitz, in Shamayim that is possibly matched by their self-sacrifice. That's an important extra point that I wanted to make. But let's get to Entebbe, because this is a fascinating story. You know the story of Entebbe. Many of you will remember the story of Entebbe. Let's see how Rabbi Vadia frames it. And now we've learned those earlier things first, I think it'll move much more smooth. Let's learn it together. Mivtza Entebbe b'halacha. Number 11. B'yam Chavtet b'Sivan. On the 29th of Sivan, Tavshin Lamed Vav. That's 1976. Nechter Matosh Shel Chevrat Air France, an Air France plane was hijacked. Shehaya b'darka mi Paris l'Israel, on the route from Paris to Israel. Aliyat Machablem, he was captured by terrorists. But Matot HaChatuf Haya Harbe Nosim, there were many passengers on the plane. B'tocham 104 Jews. Actually, quite a similar number to the number of hostages which are currently being held in Gaza. Shehaya b'darka mi Israel, on their way to Israel. Hamatos Huncha b'Uganda. The plane was landed in Uganda, 4,000 kilometers away. Uganda kiblu hamachablim siu mishiltanut Uganda shehem sonei Israel. And the Idi Amin and the Ugandans helped the terrorists because they were also Sonei Israel. Sham shuchru kol hanosim milvad Yehudim shebenehem, and they released all the non-Jewish passengers and just kept the Jews on the plane. Hachatufim hitzigu ultimatum, and they gave an ultimatum. Shebo darshu, they demanded that they should, with their fellow terrorists, should be released within 48 hours. Only 40. They only wanted 40 terrorists. Interesting proportion. 40 terrorists for 104 hostages. Okay, which is not the way that they negotiate today. Ve'im lav, they were going to kill the people if this wasn't met. And we were asked to Shaila, we'll see who we was in a minute. We were in a minute. Should we release these guilty prisoners, as demanded by the hostages, in order to save the Jewish hostages? Shema yesh lomar, or maybe do we say, shemilvad she'alidei kach potchim petach lachatifut nosefet? Are we opening the door to future hijacks and future hostage taking? Because they want to squeeze out more and more and more terrorists from us. Because they succeeded in this plan. And we also have to be careful. It's almost definite that the terrorists, the prisoners that we free from their jail, they will in the future try even harder to attack Jews in Israel. And they will have no hesitation in killing men, women, and children. And therefore, in order to save these hostages, these 104 hostages, mivadai sakana, from certain danger, we're putting the Jewish state, ubefrat be'area sapar, in particular the villages and towns on the borders. This is eerily prophetic. Al kolpanim besofik sakana mamash, at least into a sofik sakana. And he's saying it's almost definite that these people are going to try and do this. It's certainly a real doubt. So what do we do? So who are the people who were deciding this? It's interesting that Yitzhak Rabin convened this group of rabbis to decide on this question. This is the first time the Israeli government had seriously considered handing over terrorists to save hostages. Until then, they had never done it. This is in 1976. So if you look at number 12, Rav Osher Weiss notes in his tshuva, the Ma'adurat Tafshin Samach Daled, in the edition of the Yabia Omer from Rav Avadia from 2004, Shekibalti Magon Rav Avadia, he received this as a gift from Rav Avadia. Rav Osher Weiss was very close to Rav Avadia. Sasam v'loy pirish mihai gidoi haTorah. He just says it's down. He doesn't tell you who these rabbis were that were deciding. Shliash lo lamaducha. But in the later edition of the Yibia Omer, Hosiv Arushalayim, he adds in the margins, Sheyashav im Maranan v'Rabanan. Who did he sit with? Hagon Rav Yosef Shalom Eliyashiv, Hagon Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, Hagon Rav Betzalel Zolti, Hagon Rav Eliezer Goldschmidt, Hagon Rav Shaul Yisraeli, Hagon Rav Ben Zion Abba Shaul. Okay. Can't imagine a greater set of rabbis in the 1960s, 70s, sitting down to work this out. So he goes through a number of questions. First of all, he asks the following. Are we allowed to take lives in order to save lives? Or rather, to save lives and risk future lives being taken? And I'm not going to read number 13 in detail, because he basically gives the argument of the Chazon Ish that we already read. He said, don't worry about the future lives that will be in danger, because your act right now is an act of Hatzalah. You're not handing over people to be killed, you're saving Jews, and if it happens in the future that people, God forbid, are killed, that is not your responsibility. And he gives the parallel case of throwing the hand grenade out of the room, and he says that also is not an act of cruelty, that is an act of saving people, and therefore he says that is not something which is a concern. It is a concern, but it's not an overriding concern. That's his first statement. His second statement deals with the issue of Safek and Vadai, which is actually fascinating. The people who are hostages right now are in direct and certain life-threatening danger. The people in the future who may or may not be targeted, even though we think it's likely they'll try, there's at least a suffix. We don't know if they're going to be in danger. Maybe these terrorists will not try to kill people, although we don't think that's going to happen. Maybe they'll be rearrested. Maybe they'll be caught. Maybe the intelligence will work. There's lots of things that might happen in the future which are svekot, which is not relevant to the hostages right now sitting in tunnels where there's no suffix that they're in immediate danger. Are you allowed or even obligated to undergo a suffix danger in order to save someone else from a certain danger? That's very interesting, because this comes into the issue of kidney donation as well. Are you allowed or even obligated to give over a kidney to save someone's life who is in direct life-threatening danger, when giving them a kidney won't put you into direct danger, will put you into some level of danger? Is that an act of piety? Is that an obligation? How does that work? Now, I would say we're not dealing with the issue of live kidney donations today, and it could be that today's medical advances have made the danger to the donor relatively small. When it gets to the point that it's effectively the same as giving blood, I don't think it's quite that yet, but if it is effectively the same, then there won't be any question. Of course, you have to give blood in order to help save someone's life. There's almost no downside to you, and I brought you on page 6 in the footnotes some of the guidelines that Rabbi Steinberg, Rav Dr. Avram Steinberg, gives in order to decide whether you do or don't give a kidney, but I'm not getting into that right now. In principle, there's a mitzvah of lo samad adam ri'echa. You may not stand by while people are in danger. Look on the top of page 6. HaRambam Katav, the Torah Paskins. Haroeh chaveru tovea bayam, ba'nahar, If you see another person drowning in the river, meaning they're clearly drowning, they're not going to make it, they're in real difficulty. Or shelistim ba'im alav, or they're about to be attacked and you can save them. V'yochel hatzila, or she'yizkor hachem hatzila, you can save them or you can get other people to save them. You have to act. If you don't act, you are breaking the mitzvah of standing by while others are suffering. And if you do act, as if you saved the whole world, because you jumped in and you saved them. The question is, what if you're in danger? What if you're looking at this person drowning and you're thinking, oh, I can swim, but it looks really, the current is very strong. I'll probably be fine, but I'm not sure. Maybe I'll also be caught up in the current. Maybe it's worse than it looks. Maybe we'll both end up dying. What should you do? So the Bet Yosef brings down in number 15, and he says, Vakatu Hagos Maimonides, he brings the Hagos Maimonides from the Ashkenazi Rishonim, and he says, Yerushalmi, he quotes the Yerushalmi, Masik afilu lahachnis atzmoi besafek sakana, even if you're going to be in a doubtful danger, chayav, you have to intervene. You have to jump in and save them. Because when you've got a vadai and a suffix, you always go with the vadai and not the suffix. He's definitely drowning. I might drown, but probably not. But maybe I have to save him. I don't have a choice. I have to jump in. I'm halachically obligated to jump in. However, the later Meforshim say this halacha of suffix and vadai is not brought down anywhere in the Shulchan Aruch or the Ramah. And therefore, maybe it's not an obligation. And in fact, most people understand, the Radvaz brings down that giving over something that will put you in a suffix danger is an act of great piety, but it's not an obligation. We hold la halacha, it's not an obligation. Look at the case he brings, fascinating case 17. I want to explain to you, the Radvaz is living in Egypt in the 15th century. You've seen, the question is seen somewhere, if the Sultan says Israel to a Jew, you must allow me to cut off one of your limbs that you will not die from, or, and if not, amit Yisrael chavrecha, I'm going to kill this other Jew. Do you have to have your arm cut off to save another Jew? These were real shilas that they were dealing with. And this person who's asking me has read that some people says, yes, you have to have your arm cut off. You're probably not going to die. You're probably not going to die. You wanted to ask me, is that correct in halacha or is not correct? So he says to them, it's not correct. Look at the tshuva, zo midat chasidut. It's extremely pious if you agree to do that, but you don't have to. Because even though you're probably not going to die by having this cut off, maybe you'll bleed out. You never know. And who says that his blood is redder than your blood? Maybe your blood is redder, maybe his blood is redder. The Radbaz says, it's interesting. I actually saw with my own eyes. It's interesting for the doctors here. They scratched his ear to try and bleed him. Obviously, they used to bleed people a lot, so they made incisions in his ear to try and take out blood. And he bled so much that the guy passed away. There's nothing less important, if you like, or less life-threatening than just taking off the external part of your ear. Most people would not die from that, and yet this guy died. And then he says something absolutely fascinating. It also says, doesn't it say about the Torah, the ways of the Torah are pleasant. You could take this a long way, which I'm not sure you were meant to. Isn't it logical that the laws of the Torah will be like seicheldik? They will make sense for people. They will be logical for people. How could you ever imagine that a person would have to allow themselves to be blinded, or their arm cut off, or their leg cut off, in order to save someone else? It makes no sense. Nobody should be asked to do that ever. Now, it's very interesting. Since when do we paskin halacha on the basis of deracheha darchei noam? There are some occasions where we do, but it seems like a very blunt weapon. How could you expect somebody to be blinded in order to save someone's life? And therefore, he says, therefore, I paskin, that is not the halacha, and it's an act of great piety, but it is not a halachic requirement. And the Rabbi Vadia picks this up. And he says, I'll summarize what he says in number 18, because I want to move on a little bit. He says, if you were to paskin like the Yerushalmi, that you have to put yourself into Suffolk to save somebody else's vadai, he says, in theory, there's no difference between you and other people. I would have to put other people into Suffolk to save other people from vadai, because you're dealing with a Suffolk and a vadai. And the vadai, the definite, overrides the Suffolk. So in theory, I should negotiate with the terrorists and hand over the prisoners, and the future people who are in Safek Sakana, that's a Safek versus the present people's Vadai, and you can't set off the Vadai against the Safek. Because right now the people are in real danger, and the people in the future are in questionable danger. And therefore you have to go with the Vadai over the Safek. He says, however, we don't paskin like that. We paskin that it's an act of piety for you to put yourself in danger. He says, nevertheless, when you are a third party and you're deciding tragically between this group of people who are vadai, really in danger, and this group of people who could be in danger, you still have to go with the vadai. You don't have to put yourself in danger, but if you have to make a choice, you have to go with the people who are definitely in danger, which is very interesting. So again, he's using that argument to say that you would have to negotiate and release the prisoners, because the future danger is a Suffolk and the present danger is a vadai. Yes?
What about the idea that you shouldn't give too much money to save someone because it will encourage future kidnapping? And if that person was in definite danger, you would give too much money? Or
No, because the question is how much is too much? And he's saying here that putting other people into questionable danger is not considered too much when redeeming hostages. It's not considered.
We know that they'll end up.
We don't know. We strongly suspect.
Did we see from
Yes, correct. And he said at the very beginning, he's not naive. He says, I know full well that it's almost certain that these people will do that, try their hardest to cause future deaths. But it's not certain. It's almost.
I'm not just talking about deaths, like that these terrorists will go and kill people, but it's going to increase the likelihood of kidnapping.
100%. But he says, at the end of the day, we first of all, you may go with the view that we can overpay in order to save people's lives. That's one view. And at the end, he's going to say it could be that this whole discussion is going to be different in a situation of war. We're going to talk about whether it's different in a situation of war. But right now, he's just weighing up this one issue. Do you weigh up the suffix? You set the suffix against the vada. Let's go on a little bit. I put you on page 7 some issues where we really have to try very hard to avoid murder, to even being accessories to murder. This is going to weigh on the other side. Well, truth is, it weighs on both sides. All of this weighs on both sides. But these sources here talk, the Ritva in number 19 has a very interesting din. Ein doichin nefesh mipnei nefesh. You can't hand over a life to save a life. V'nirish shekain hadin, and I think, says a Ritva in the Middle Ages, this is also the halacha, but OUisrael, let's say someone says to a Jew, Tein li klei zaynecha, give me your weapons cache, v'arog Yisrael, and I'm going to kill Jews with weapons, ve'im lav arog otcha, and if you don't give me the keys to the weapons cupboard, I'm going to kill you. Now that's very interesting. Do you have to die rather than hand over the keys to the weapons that they're going to use to kill others? Says the Ritva, and then the non-Jew can't get to it without your help. You may not give over the key in order to save your life. Very interesting. Because you may not be a party to the future murder of other people. Now again, this weighs in the other direction. In some way, if you are an accessory, you're helping people organize their tools in order to kill people. That is itself an accessory in some way to murder. Number 20, Rav Zilberstein in the Chashuche Chemed, the brother-in-law, the son-in-law of Eliashiv, he has an interesting case here, a tragic case. Mechablim hamachrichim Yehudi legalot machbu neshek. The same idea that there are terrorists who are torturing a Jew to reveal where the weapons are. Does he have to die rather than reveal them? And he basically concludes, yes, you may not give over the weapons if they're going to be used to kill future people. He brings down a stat at the end. Maybe if you're not sure, and they might be, they might not be, so then maybe there's a different situation. But basically this is still the same idea. You may not be an accessory to murder. It's part of murder. This is very interesting. Why would that be? Just in parentheses. So you could say it's lifnei iver. Lifnei iver is you may not give people the ability to commit sins, to stumble in future ways. But since when have you had to give up your life rather than commit the prohibition of lifnei iver? Lifnei iver is one of the 613, but it's not one of the big 3, is it? Why would you have to give up your life for that? Which raises a fascinating methodological question, is lifnei iver a separate prohibition, or is it a local part of each other prohibition? Let's say you encourage somebody or help someone to break Shabbos. What did you break? Did you break lifnei iver, or did you on some level break Shabbos? The lifnei iver bit of Shabbos. Or let's say you encourage someone to eat non-kosher. Did you break lifnei iver, which is one of the 613, or did you break the laws of kashrus? So that would have an implication here. If you encourage and help people to murder, did you break lifnei iver? In which case, why would you die rather than do that? Or do you actually murder someone on some level? In which case, maybe you would have to die. Fascinatingly, number 21, the Targum Yonasan, I got this from Rabbi Feldman and his shir, he says there on the mitzvah of lo sirtzach, do not murder. Ami bnei Yisrael lo tehaven kotlik tolin. The Jewish people may not be killers. V'lo chavrin v'lo shutfin imak tolin. They may not be accessories and partners with murderers either, which is very interesting. And the Ibn Ezra even brings down in 22 on the prohibition of not murdering, that you can't even give testimony which is going to get somebody murdered, or withhold information which is going to save somebody's life, and that is ke'ilu, you are murdering them as well. Now I'm not sure he's speaking halachically, but murder is obviously a very, very broad prohibition, and if we're in any way accessories to that, we can be included in that.
If you're a witness to a murder, you can give testimony that somebody murdered.
Yeah, of course you can. If you're giving testimony which is true testimony, right, but you can't say something false, he's saying, which is going to get somebody killed. Something false, something true, of course you can say. But you can't say a falsehood. Oh, you say, well, I just spoke. I didn't murder anyone, I just spoke. The answer is, no, you didn't just spoke. You spoke and somebody was killed wrongly because of what you said. That is almost the idea of murder. So again, we have to be extremely careful that we're not in some way being accessories to murder, and that would weigh on the other side. That we're not murdering the hostages, they were taken by Hamas, but we're somehow enabling other people in the future to be murdered, maybe it's included in our responsibility. That's also a major consideration. Two other considerations. Go over the page. Page 8. Rabbi towards the end of his tshuva, having gone through all of the other issues, is this called putting a life for a life? And he said no, because you're saving, not handing over. Is this a suffix and a vadai situation? He says yes, and you can't normally set off a suffix against a vadai. Is it warm in here, by the way? Yeah. It's a bit warm in here. It's not warm, okay? It's not warm in here. Sheva al Tase. It's not warm in here. I'm always warm. Look what he says in number 23. Again for the doctors. Okay, for 7 minutes we'll have to argue about it. Okay, fine. Look at number 23. Bar midain, apart from all the things we've said, this is Rabbi Vadia speaking further. Should we be more focused on the immediate danger to life? Of the 100 hostages, he's talking about on the plane. But the future danger, even the likely danger, to occur later, by freeing prisoners and terrorists, that's not pikuach nefesh today. That's pikuach nefesh next year, in 10 years. Hopefully never, but certainly not today. El tavach rachok. It's in a future horizon. After time. What is the key source here? This is a famous Nodi Yehuda. We talked about it in this year. Even though you're allowed to do an autopsy on a dead body, which is normally prohibited min Torah because of nivul hamet, you may not desecrate a body. You're allowed to do an autopsy. L'tzorich limud rufu'i, because you need to learn essential medical knowledge. La'achish rufuat ta'aleh, to get an effective medication. L'cholem mesukan, for someone who's sick. Hanimtze lefanenu, who is right now. Somebody just died of a plague. Somebody else is getting that plague. I can do an autopsy if that might help me to save the person right now who has a danger as well. And they have the same sickness, Shelanifta, of the person who died. Maybe we'll learn it. We'll learn from this. This is a real suffix pikuach nefesh. And that absolutely we can override any problem of autopsy. If people might be saved in the future, but we don't have a patient right now. I want to do autopsies. Maybe because we learn we'll learn more about the anatomy, more about the pathology of this particular disease. We'll find a medicine in the future, we'll find an inoculation. And then in the future we'll find a cure. That's not called pikuach nefesh lefaninu. The fact that I might find a cure in the future doesn't entitle me to do an autopsy. Because if it did, then you'd be allowed to do anything on Shabbos. Of course I can work on Shabbos. I'm a research physician, and I'm going to drive to the lab, and who knows? Maybe I will this Shabbos discover the cure that'll save millions of people in the future. That's not called pikuach nefesh. You're not allowed to break Shabbos for that. Because it's not pikuach nefesh lefanenu, and therefore he says also the hostages who are in life-threatening danger now, that's pikuach nefesh lefanenu. But the people in the future, even if you say they'll be pikuach nefesh, that's not pikuach nefesh lefanenu. It's not right now. I've only got 3 or 4 minutes. I'll answer your question afterwards. You see which way Rabbi Vadia is leaning on this shaila. They're basically leaning in the favor of saying to Rabin, you can release the prisoners to save the hostages. The actual end of Entebbe was very different, which we'll come to in a second. Let me just in parentheses point out section C6 to you, that there are many other reasons and factors that we haven't dealt with, and the two perhaps most important ones are these, before we get to the ending. It could be that everything we've said so far is irrelevant. I'm sorry to tell you. We paid good money to come to a shir. Okay? Why? Because maybe the halacha in the time of war is completely different. And many poskim bring this up. It could be that the considerations are not just lives versus lives. But maybe the soldiers need to know that if they're captive, we'll always come for them and they'll never be left behind. And that will help their morale to fight. On the other hand, maybe the opposite, like I said last week. If you ask soldiers who are fighting today, if God forbid you get captured, would you like us to release 1,000 Palestinian prisoners to get you released? I don't know a single one that would say yes. So you've got these cheshbonot. How is it going to make the war effort go better? And maybe the laws for a sovereign state are different. And we'll have to look at that in a future shiur. Maybe not next week, maybe yes. What are the laws of war? Where do we get them from? Is there a halachic book that we can pull out off the shelf, the laws of war? None of these things we've been discussing today have been talking about war. They've been talking about individuals. Where are we going to get the laws of war? Is there such a thing as the halachas of war? It's not in the Shulchan Aruch. So where would it be? And also, what are the halachas of a state? What is a halachic state? Where do we get the halachot for a state? Again, it's not in the Shulchan Aruch. These are bigger questions, actually enormous questions, which I would like to give some shiurim on. I don't know if I'll have the time to research them by next week, but I would like to give some shiurim. But for now, let's stay with Entebbe and let's finish off. Number 24. This is one of the most wonderful endings to a tshuva. Rabbi Vadia, after 17,000 words, he ends with the following. 24. V'hinei b'tatasef Roshei ha'am, when all these great rabbis were sitting together, Gedai leHaTorah, ladun b'nosei hazeh mib'chinat halacha. They'd asked us to decide on this, and again, they were leaning towards saying, you can release the prisoners. U'b'tach kedei adiyunim, while we were still sitting in the room, discussing it in Rabbi Vadia's house in Hachova Kablan, in Har Nof, as far as I'm aware, we were debating the halacha. Higia Rosh HaMemshala Mar Yitzchak Rabin Zechrono Livrocha. Yitzchak Rabin knocks on the door. For Rabbi Vadia, that was probably an everyday occurrence. The Prime Minister, Eleinu, Ubiser Lanu et Basura Hamarina, and he gave us the unbelievably uplifting news. Shekvait Silo Anshe Tzal Lechasel et Hamchablim Harashaim, that the Tzal had gone in and they'd eliminated the terrorists, that Oizrim Uganda and those who helped them in Uganda, Shachre et Met HaChatufim, and they got all 100 of the hostages out of Yehudim. Hashem Yishmerehu v'Yichayehu, may God protect all these people, he says. V'heim b'darkam la'Eretz Yisrael, and they're on the way back in a plane to Eretz Yisrael. And then he ends off the tshuva, he goes into a completely different mode. He says, Tehilot lekel yitbarach, praise to God, Asher higdil chastoi v'nifloisav, imanu, that God has given us all of these miracles, Ru'u kol afsei aretz, and all the people in the world will see Yeshua Elokeinu, v'chol umas ha'olam heima ra'u, v'chein tamu v'yishtoimamu, the world will be astounded Gvurat Yisrael, at the strength of the Jewish people. Hashem Minisharim Kalu, lighter than eagles, Ma'arayot Gavru, stronger than, braver than lions, V'higdilu la'asot be'ezrat Hashem, L'hatzil l'kuchim emaves, and we'll be able to save even more people. Hey Me'et HaChatufim, we've saved 100. Who Hevehevim Israel, Berina v'simchas olam al Rasham, and what a simcha that we're bringing them back. Ki ein matzur laHashem laHoshia b'rav u'ma'ad, because nothing holds God from holding back, from saving the great, the many, or the few. Baruch podeh amatzil, and he starts saying brachas. Baruch podeh amatzil, ki gavar eino chasta ve'emes Hashem li'olam, hallelujah. Baruch makadesh shemoi b'rabim. Okay, we would like an ending like that, okay, for the current crisis. So we have to daven for that. But it's just fascinating how he ends in that way. Very quickly, I don't want to go over it. Yeah, sorry, Lady Hay had a question.
The permission for the autopsy to take place to save someone immediately,
yes,
gives permission to organ transplant.
Okay, that's another question. The problem with organ transplants is the person dead. With an autopsy, we know for sure that the person is not alive. With an organ transplant, that is the key. Yes, quickly. Yes.
Aren't we always have war?
Oh, that's a good one. We'll have to deal with that. Yes. We are always at war at the moment. Correct. And that's maybe why some of these sources may not be so relevant. But go away and think about what we said today. This, in summary, is the back and forth of Rabbi Vadia's tshuva. And we will either next week go on to a different topic to lighten the mood, or we will go even deeper into this topic also to lighten the mood and help us to understand the Torah better. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.